Praise Yah. This is your brother Kazak Yah, and we're going to do a study of the book of Galatians, or I should say the letter of Galatians. Let me correct myself, because the letter that Shaul wrote is a letter. It's not a book, it's a letter. There's a difference between a book and a letter. Letter, which was written from Shaul, Paul the Apostle, to the people of Galations. By way of history, the Galatians were there's two particular theories with regards to the Galatians. One is that we have the northern and the southern theory, which basically talks about the northern theory of the book of Galatians. Talks about that the Galatians were actually descendants of the Gauls, who are basically the progenitors of the Celtic people. And the other theory is that the South Galatia theory is talking about those who lived in the Galatian Peninsula, who were Galatian citizens. Okay, now whichever one is true or not is a whole nother ballgame, but we do know as a fact that predominantly the people that Shaul was ministered to were not actually physical Hebrew Israelites, but these were actually Greek-speaking people. Some of them, it may have been a few in the number that were actually Hebrews by ethnicity, but for the most part, they were Greek-speaking people, right? So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start in the first epistle of the letter of Shaul to the Galatians. And while I'm on that note, I want to say that we have to understand that the letter of Shaul is not Torah. It is actually a letter that he wrote to a people called Galatians. Now, also I want to add that Shaul is a Hebrew, which means that he has a responsibility to come under the Torah, the rules, regulations, the code of ethics of the Israelite nation, just like you and I. So he or anybody else cannot make up their own theory or doctrine. Okay, now we're going to show you some things in this chapter as we begin to read. Galatians chapter 1 verse 1. It says, Paul an apostle, not of men, neither by man, but by Yahshuwah the Messiah and Elohim the Father. So now we see that he's stating his position as being an apostle by his call, okay, who has raised him from the dead, okay, and to all the brethren which are with me unto the congregations of Galatia. So he's talking to more than one. It's more than one congregation. These are congregations of Galatia, which he's talking about, right? He says, grace and peace be to you from Elohim the Father and from our Master Yahshua the Messiah, who gave himself for our sins, that he might deliver us from the present evil world, according to the will of Elohim the Father, to whom be glory forever and ever. Amen. Verse 6. I marvel that you are soon removed. I marvel that you are so soon removed, rather, from him that called you unto grace of the Messiah unto another gospel. Okay, now this is basically extends from the great debate that went on. If you go to Acts the 15th chapter, you'll see the great debate that went on about the Israelites having people coming into the belief of the Messiah but not having the physical circumcision. And that was the issue of the day. Now, without jumping and going into that, I'm going to do an addendum to this particular lesson to understand some things and the position with regards to the law of circumcision. Okay, but be that as it may, we're going to continue in this. We're going to try to stick with this letter of Galatians, to exegete the letter of Galatians, and then we'll come back and we'll do an addendum. Okay, all right. Now, so he says that you have returned to another gospel. Now he's going to explain himself in this letter, okay, which is not another, but there be some that trouble you and would pervert the good news of the Messiah, right? But though we or an angel from heaven preach any other good news or gospel unto you then that which we have preached unto you, let him be accursed. And that's absolutely true, right? As we said before, so say I now again, if any man preach any other good news or gospel unto you than that you have received, let him be accursed. So he says it 2 times, right? Verse 10. We in 1 Galations chapter 1, verse 10. For do I now persuade men or Elohim, or do I seek to please men? For I yet please men, I should not be the servant of the Messiah. So now what I want to be clear before we go any further here is we have a sect of people who the world has labeled as Judaizers, who actually had traditions that went against the laws and the precepts that the Father gave us. And we see an example of that in the story when the Messiah said that he asked his disciples, he said, why do you break the tradition of the elders by not having your disciples to wash their hands when they break bread? And then the Messiah came back and said, why do you break the commandment with your tradition? So we understand that there were traditions that people actually taught is what the subject is, dealing with the traditions versus the commandment. Let's be clear what we're talking about, okay? Verse 11. But I certify you, brethren, that the good news which was preached of me is not after man. For I neither received it of men, neither was I taught it, but by the revelation of the Messiah. For you have heard of my conversation in time past in the faith of the Israelites. It says here the Jews' religion. We're going to throw that out because that's an incorrect translation. So the faith of the Israelites, or the faith of the Yahudim. How that beyond measure I persecuted the believers, or the congregation of Elohim, and wasted it, and profited in the faith of the Israelites above many my equals in my own nation, being more exceedingly zealous of the traditions of my fathers. Okay, now, once again, we want to be quite clear when we're reading here. He's talking about traditions of my fathers. So if we go back, and maybe possibly he is talking about a religion that's called Judaism, because if we had time, which we're not going to do it, if we had time to go to 2 Kings chapter 17, we would see that the king of Assyria had taken the northern tribes of Israel out the land, had put impostors in the land, and they became known as the Samaritans. So at that particular point in time is when they created all of these traditions and oral laws that we call the tradition of the fathers. So we want to be quite clear when we talk what we're talking about the tradition of the fathers. So this is what he's talking about. He's talking about the traditions that had become a practice amongst these people who lived in the land of Israel called Samaritans. Amongst those people you had Pharisees and scribes. Okay, let's continue now. Now we have that understanding. But when it pleased Elohim, who separated me from my mother's womb and called me by his grace to reveal his son in me, right? That I might preach what? I might preach among the heathen. Immediately I conferred not with flesh and blood. Okay, so now he was called to preach this good news amongst those who are what? The believers, or I should say, those who would become believers of the uncovenant people. Okay? These were non-covenant people that were without, outsiders, right? Verse 17. Neither went I up to Jerusalem to them which were apostles before me, but I went into Arabia and returned again to Damascus. Right? Now, we're not going to go through his call to the ministry because you can read about that in the book of Acts. It'll show you how he was called and everything that he went through as being called. Verse 18, then after 3 years I went into Jerusalem to see Shimon Kepha and abode with him 15 days. So he stayed there with Shimon Kepha 15 days. And quite nasty when he went in Jerusalem, and he was at one point in time one who persecuted the believers, and now he's a believer now. They're like, whoa, is this the same guy? Okay. So he was with them for 15 days, trying to convince them that, hey, I'm a believer now, right? Verse 19. But other of the apostles saw I none except for Yaakov, the master, Yahshua's brother. Okay. King James says James. Okay. James, his given name that he was known by as he walked the face of the earth was Yaakov. Okay. Now, the things which I write unto you, behold, before Elohim I lie not. Afterwards I came in and to the regions of Syria and Cilicia, right, which is a province of the Mediterranean, which is where we get the word Sicily from, right? And I believe that's where the word Sicily comes from. Okay, don't quote me on that though. I believe that's where it came from, and was unknown by face unto the assemblies of Yehudia, which were in the Messiah. So they did not know this man, because once again, Shaul was one who persecuted those who were believers in the Messiah, right? But they had heard only that we had persecuted us, that he was persecuted us in times past, now preach the belief which once he destroyed, right? And what was the belief that he once destroyed? That the Messiah, Yahshuwah, is the man that fulfilled the law and the prophets. He is the man that the prophets spoke of. He is the man that the law mirror and shadows, right? Verse 24, and they glorify Elohim in me. Chapter 2 of the book of, or I should say, the letter of Galatians, chapter 2, which is where we're going to get into some controversial things here, all right? Now, verse 1. Then 14 years after I went up into Jerusalem with Barnabas, and took Titus with me also. I went up by revelation, and communicated unto them that good news which I preached among the Gentiles, but privately to them which were of reputation, lest by any means I should run or had run in vain. Now, so in other words, he's saying privately he had private lessons and sessions with people, not coming forth with his ministry at this particular point in time, but he had, like, I guess you could say, in-home Bible studies, if you will. And he says, lest by any means I should run or had run in vain. Because now, Shaul, we're going to read some things here, had become filtered into the Greco-Roman society. And some of the traditional practices of the Greco-Roman society became a part of his way of being. Okay? Verse 3 says, but neither Titus, who was with me, being a Greek, was compelled to be circumcised. Right? Now, notice what Shaul was saying. He didn't compel him to be circumcised. Let's continue. And that because of false brethren, unawares, brought in, who came in privately. So now he's saying false brethren. We need to be clear that Shaul was a very much hated brother. People didn't believe he was real. You have people that that in all walks of your belief, your religious belief, that are we call fake brothers and sisters. They may be believers in the faith that you're in, but maybe they're jealous of you, or maybe they're not really trustworthy, right? So this is what we're looking at here. He said false brothers that who had an agenda. We have people like that in all religious walks of life, that brothers that have an agenda, right? So he said these were false brothers. These were brothers that were supposed to be his brothers, but they had an agenda. They were trying to get him, right? And we could see that if we actually went through the book of Acts, we could see the turmoil that he went through with people who said they were believers and they were brothers of his, but yet they wanted to have him done in, right? Okay, now, He said, which we have in the Messiah. He says, they came in privately to spy out the liberty which we have in the Messiah, Yahshuwah, that they might bring us into bondage. Now, what we need to understand in between verse 3 and verse 4 is a change of thought, right? Because he's talking about now, first he said he did not circumcise Timothy, or Titus rather, and now he comes and says these false brethren came in, right, who came to privately spy out our liberty, which we have in the Messiah, that they might bring us into bondage. Now, this bondage is not talking about the law of circumcision, right? Because the law of circumcision was not a law for bondage, right? And if we had time, we would go there. As I said, we're going to do an addendum. If we had time, we would go there. But we'll see that the circumcision law was a token of a covenant as well as a cleanly law for man, for the man type. Okay? Now, so that quite naturally is not a bondage. Something that which is good for you could never be bondage. So he's not talking in verse 4 about circumcision being a bondage, but he's talking about that they came in with, and basically it goes back to chapter 1. He's talking at this particular point about the traditions of the fathers. It had nothing to do with the law, the Torah, but the traditions of the fathers had everything to do with the practices that the people who was practicing a religious form of the covenant had put on the people. Just like in the days of the Messiah, when he said, woe to you scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, right? That's what he's talking about. Let's not mistake Torah obedient believers with people who have created traditions of the fathers. Let's not confuse the two, okay? And that will break a lot of the confusion in this particular letter if we understand the difference between the traditions and those who were actually compliant to the laws of life, right? That the shadow of Torah was a reflection off of the Mashiach himself. All right, now, so are we clear there on that particular verse? All right. So these brothers came in to bring them into bondage to all of these laws and rules and regulations that the traditions of the elders had created, in addition to Yah's code of ethics, Yah's laws, and Yah's statutes, right? Verse 5. He said, to whom we had placed no subjection, no not for an hour, that the truth of the good news might continue with you. So in other words, I didn't come to put all of that bondage, these traditions that the elders, and you know what, when you really think about it, right? Many Hebrews who come into the knowledge of the covenant of Israel, that they are Israelites and those that had joined themselves to Israel, the next thing they want to do is they want to go off and learn about practices of things like Judaism and Kabbalahism and all that kind of stuff like that. Shaul is saying here that I'm not putting that bondage on you. That stuff, the Father didn't give us that. That's a bondage that man put on there to put their little spin on the covenant, to make a religion out of it, to put the covenant that the Father gave with the nation of Israel on the same shelf with the religions of the world. Right? All right. Verse 6. But of these whom seem to be somewhat whatsoever they were, it maketh no matter to me. Elohim accepteth no man's person. For they who seem to be somewhat in conference added nothing to me. So we're talking about these men who brought those traditions to add it to what believers in the Messiah who would embrace the covenant of Israel had to do. This is all he's talking about, right? Verse 7. But contrariwise, when they saw that the good news of the uncircumcision was committed unto me as the good news of the circumcision unto Shimon Kepha. Now, let's be clear what he's saying here in verse 7. He's not saying there is a gospel of uncircumcision and that there is a gospel of circumcision. All he basically is saying here in verse 7 is that he says that the good news of the uncircumcision was committed to him, meaning that those who were outsiders, who were not physical Israelites, the good news of the Messiah and of the covenant was given to him, just like the good news of the Messiah was given to the circumcised or the covenant Israelites who had not known about the Messiah or who had not received the Messiah. That's what he's talking about, okay? Now, for he that wrought effectually in Shimon Kepha to the apostleship of the circumcision or of the Israelites. So when we see that circumcision, let's put the physical, natural born Israelite in that place, right? The same was mightily in me towards the Gentiles, or now he says Gentiles, or the other nations, or those who were not of the natural born seed of Israel. Now you see how this is working now? So now it's making a whole lot of sense, right? Okay, verse 9. And when Yaakov and Kepha and Yochanan, who seemed to be pillars, perceived that the grace or the grace that was given unto me, they gave me and Barnabas the right hands of fellowship, that we should go into the heathen and they unto the circumcised. So he's saying they gave them the right hand of fellowship to do what? To go amongst those who were not Israelites by natural born. And they had the gift to go amongst the Israelites. Okay? Ask yourself a question, right? Why would the Israelites have to go amongst other Israelites who already knew the covenant? Okay? Answer to that question is this. All the Israelites did not know the Messiah. They had not accepted. As a matter of fact, the whole nation rejected him, said he's not our king. They said away with him. They said impale him. So when they said that, so now these brothers was convinced that they had a responsibility to go to the natural born Israelite by seed to let them know, hey, wake up. This is the Messiah who was promised by the prophets to come and to allow us to be brought back under the bonds of the covenant. Okay? Now, verse 10. Only they would that we should remember the poor, the same which I also was forwarded to do. You see that? Now we understand. The emphasis is on what? Reaching out to those who Shaul had reached out to those who were non-physical Israelites, and Shaul or Shimon Kepha was to reach out to those who were natural physical born Israelites, right? With the good news of the Messiah. Verse 11. But when Peter was come to Antioch, and watch this now. Watch the turn here, okay? Verse 11. When Kepha or Peter was come to Antioch, I withstood him to the face because he was to be blamed. Now, verse 12. For before that certain came from Yaakov, he did eat with the Gentiles. But when they were come, he withdrew and separated himself, fearing them which were of the circumcision. See that? So now, in other words, Shaul, Shimon Kepha rather, was eating amongst the Gentiles, right? Because he kind of was accepting the Gentile. Remember remember the experience that Shimon Kepha had, where he was like he really didn't want to accept the Gentiles, and he had his vision eating these unclean meats. He said, "Whoa, hold on for a second. I'd never eat anything unclean and common, right?" But the end result of that lesson was that it was for him to receive those that were of another nation, apart from the physical, natural born Israelite seed, right? Now, so now he was hanging out with those who were not natural born Israelites, and he was living like those who were not natural born Israelites. Now watch what he says. Now this, he's not talking about circumcision here. He's talking about the customs and the practices. Shimon Kefa apparently was getting involved in the traditions of the elders and putting, but yet he was living a hypocritical life, right? Verse 13. And the other Yehudim dissembled likewise with him, insomuch that Barnabas also was carried away with their dissimulation, right? Verse 14. But when I saw that they walked not uprightly according to the truth of the good news, I said to Shimon Kefa before them all, if you being an Israelite are living after the manner of the Gentiles, or you living like a Gentile, right? And he said, and not do as the Israelites. He says, then why are you compelling the Gentiles to live as the Israelites or the Yehudim? He says, we, verse 15, who are Israelites by nature and not sinners of the Gentiles, knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by the faith of the Messiah, Yahshuwah, even we have believed in Yahshuwah the Messiah, that we might be justified by faith of the Messiah, and not by works of the law, nor by the works of the law shall no flesh be justified. Right? Now, once again, when we look at this, we're talking about traditions, because you have oral laws. Anybody that know anything about the historical Israelites, they had oral laws that was created. So when we are looking at the letters, we have to understand what laws are we talking about, because once again, there were oral laws that was created, which was put in the book of, like, the Talmud, the Babylonian and the Jerusalem Talmud. All these oral laws was put in the book, and so he's saying now he's telling him, because hey, you practicing a lot of these laws, okay? Man-made laws, traditions of men that you made, right? Just like what the Messiah said, you have made the commandment of Elohim of none effect with your tradition. The traditions of the elders became known as the law of the elders. Did you know that? So we talk about the law, we can't lump everything and say, oh, let's talk about the Ten Commandments, or let's talk about the dietary law, or let's talking about the cleansing laws. No, we have to be specific in what component of law is being mentioned here, is being talked about, okay? Verse 17. But if while we seek to be justified by the Messiah, we ourselves are found sinners, is therefore the Messiah the minister of sin? Elohim forbid. For I build again the things which I destroyed, I make myself a transgressor. Right now, so he says, for if I build again the things which I destroyed. What did he destroy? Shaul didn't destroy the law, brothers and sisters. That wasn't his place. He didn't destroy the law. So we quite naturally can't be talking about the law of Yah or the code of ethics. He said, if I build the things which I destroyed, he did not destroy nothing. The works of the flesh he destroyed in itself, right? But he did not destroy the law, because he didn't have it in his power to destroy it. So quite naturally, he's not talking about that if I build the things which I destroyed. He didn't destroy nothing. He didn't destroy the law. So this is incorrect. Verse 19, for I through the law am He said, I, through the law, am dead to the law, that I might live unto Elohim. You see that? Now, explain that, okay? We'll explain it. For I, through the law, right, am dead to the law, that I might live unto Elohim. So, through obedience to the law, I am dead to the law of judgment, to that law. Because the law of sin and death had a judgment. If you don't do this, if you do this rather, bam, you get judged. You would die. But now, if you walk in agreement with the law or fulfill the law like the Messiah did, like the Messiah said in Matthew 5, think not I come to destroy the law, but to fulfill the law, to walk in agreement with the law, to carry the law out, to fulfill, not to fall short. He says, through the law, am dead to the law, what? To the law of death. Because if I, through the law of life, obedience, fulfill the law, I'm dead to the law of what? Death. So you have different components of the law. The law of sin and the law of death. Sin, you die, right? Obey, right. You have righteousness, right? All right. Now, verse 20. He says, I am crucified, or impaled, whichever you choose, with the Messiah. Nevertheless, I live, yet not I, but the Messiah. Why? Because I do what? I died with the Messiah, right? Through what? The Messiah did what? He humbled himself, right? He obeyed all things. He fulfilled the law. He humbled himself, brothers and sisters, so that he would do what? Fulfill all things. So Shaul saying, I'm crucified. I obey my Creator from the top to the bottom, from one ear to the other. Right? And because of that, he said, now I live, yet not I, but the Messiah, because on the other end, I resurrect to new life with him. You see. And he says, but Messiah lives in me, and the life which I now live in the flesh, right? I live by faith. Why? Because, see, what most people don't understand is the Messiah, when he died, he didn't die so you can just live and do what you want to do, and I'm just saved by grace through faith. No, the Messiah died, right? He's called what? The last Adam, right? Now, the first Adam had what? In the Garden of Eden, the first Adam had an opportunity to do what? To be righteous. Through what? Obedience, right? He was what? Sinless. He was made what? Innocent, right? He didn't have sin in his life. He was innocent, right? But he was put before the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and he had to do what? Choose life, that he might do what? Live, right? Now, even in Deuteronomy chapter 30, he says, I put before you life and death, blessings and curses. Choose life that you might do what? Live, right? Okay, now, he says, I live by the faith of the Son of Elohim, who loved me and gave himself for me. So with my death, I'm buried with him in death and risen with him in what? Righteousness. Why? Because I suffered. That's what the Messiah told. He said, if you suffer with me, you shall do what? Reign with me. Suffering means what? Humbling yourself to do what? To obey what the Creator says to do. That's the death process. Right? Now, does this make sense now? Let's continue. He says, verse 21, I do not frustrate the grace of Elohim. If righteousness come by the law, then the Messiah is dead in vain. Right? Now, we know that the law was not given to save us. The law was given us to do what? To teach us the way of life. So indirectly, the way of life is salvation. And even Shaul says in one of his other letters, we won't get to this on this particular lesson here, but he said that the law was the schoolmaster to bring us into that which, to bring us into perfection, right? Now, so the law, it says, if righteousness come by the law, then the Messiah is dead in vain. Now, when we talk about law, once again, we're talking about multiple components of the law. This also includes the oral law, the laws that the traditions of the elders created, which some of those laws were actually good laws. But he's saying that righteousness comes by, he says righteousness comes by, if righteousness came by the law, then the Messiah is dead in vain. See? Now this leads us to chapter 3. But did I make myself clear in that last verse? Righteousness does not come by the law. Now, let me say this. On the other side, if you are not in compliance with the law, then maybe you're not righteous. If you can do what you want to do, break the law, and say, oh, I'm saved by grace through faith, I don't have to keep the law, then maybe you're not righteous. I go as far out as to say this: you're not righteous. Because righteousness, you're going to what? Work out your own soul salvation. That which is on the inside is going to do what? Come out, right? So the reflection of the heart is going to reflect itself in the life. Because even in the Greek definition, the word for grace, it means to an inward manifestation, rather, which is reflection in the life, right? Now, let me do this here. Let me just pause. I'm going to give you, since that came to my mind, I'll go ahead and give you the actual Greek equivalent for that. It's the word 5485, which is charis. And it says graciousness, gratifying. It says a divine influence upon the heart, right? And its reflection in the life. So even in the Greek sense of the word grace means a divine influence upon the heart, right? And its reflection in the life. So your grace, when you say I'm saved by grace, you're saying I'm saved by my heart first, which is carried out in my walk, right? Because belief is carried out by an action. Belief is not just a thought, it's an action word. When you say you believe, that's what James was saying, Yaakov was saying. He said faith without works is dead, because in the Hebrew thought of mind, you can't believe without having an action, without having a corresponding action. So the grace is actually, it says it is from the Greek perspective, charis, which means it's divine influence upon the heart and its reflection in the life. All right. Now let's go back to Galatians 3. Now Shaul says this. He says, "Oh, foolish Galatians, who have bewitched you that you should not obey the truth, before whose eyes the Messiah Yahshuwah has been evidently set forth, crucified or impaled among you." Right? This only what I learned of you, receive ye the Spirit by the works of the law, or by the hearing of faith. So the thing is, you do what? You receive of the Spirit first, and then you do what? You walk out. You work out, Shaul said. You work out your own soul salvation. After you believe, your faith does what? Follows. When a man says he believes and his faith doesn't follow, then he don't have no faith. He got works. He's got faith without works, which is dead. Right? You understand now? Verse 3, he said, we're in chapter 3, verse 3. "Oh, you foolish! Are you so foolish, having begun in the Spirit, and are now made perfect in the flesh?" Right? have you suffered so many things in vain, if it be yet in vain? He therefore that ministereth to you the Spirit and work of miracles among you, doth he do it by works of the law or by hearing of faith? Right? That's a question, right? Now, does he do that by what? The works of the flesh or works of the law or by the hearing of faith? Once again, quite naturally, no. Nothing is done, has ever been done in Israel by the works of the law. Everything was done by faith, by belief, which had a corresponding action. Even Abraham, when he was told to leave out from his family and go to a land, his faith, belief was carried out by what? An action. So you can't have one without the other. But the action does not give you the prize. It's the belief followed by the walk. All right. He says in verse 6, even Abraham believed Elohim, and it was counted to him for righteousness. Why? So why did Abraham believe? Father told him to do what? Get from his family and go to a land I'm going to show you. So what Abraham believed and did what? Carried it out. Left out of his land, didn't he? He didn't stay there in the land of the Chaldees. He left out, didn't he? So he believed with what? The corresponding action, right? With was what? Corresponding action to belief is what? To carry out the deed, right? Now, let me show you something, right? Just put the word believe. All right? Now, the word for believe in Hebrew, are you ready for this now? You're really not ready for this, are you? The word for believe in Hebrew is aman, right? Or amen, which means to do what? To build up or to support, to foster. It says as a parent or nurse, to render, to be firm, to do what? Or faithful, to trust, believe, to permanent or quiet, morally to be true or certain, to go to the right hand, right? So now, in the word faith, which is aman in the Hebrew, it means believe, I should say. The word believe in the Hebrew, aman, means to do something. It doesn't mean you have a thought. Oh, he believed, he thought, he pondered on it. Oh yes, he believed, I believe, yeah. No, he did what? He heard the word, then he did what? He saw a picture in his mind, and then he did what? Walked it out of the flesh. Left out the land and went to the place where he was told to go, right? So, Abraham, aman, he built up, supported, he did what? He consented, he agreed, right? He rendered, he fostered, right? He was morally correct by, because there's another place in there it says, the Most High told Abraham, he said, walk before me. I'm going to examine your steps. We know what the what one of the letters says. It says, the steps of a righteous man are ordered. All right, now, I don't know where I left off at, but let's go back to verse 6 said, Abraham believed, therefore was counted to him for righteousness. So he believed by by building up, by rendering, by being firm, by being permanent, by being true, by being faithful to what the Father said, to do what the Father said to do. It says, now verse 7, know ye therefore that they which are of faith, faith, an action word. Anybody out there? Shalom. Ye which are of faith, the same are the children of Abraham. So how could you be of faith if you don't do nothing? Just like Abraham carried out an action, you have to carry out the action. They which are of faith, the same are the children of Abraham. They which are of faith, they which have a corresponding action. You believe. You have a corresponding action to do what you believe you're supposed to do according to what Abraham did. He says, the same are the children of Abraham. Verse 8. The scripture foreseeing that Elohim would justify the heathen through faith. Through faith what? Through a corresponding action. It's just like when you came into your faith, the ordinance of the church when I was in the church was baptism in water. We didn't teach that you had to be baptized to be saved, but guess what? If you wanted to be an ordained minister, you had to get water baptized. You see how that works now? So we understand. He says, the scripture foreseeing that Elohim would justify the heathen, those who are not physical born seed, just like he promised Abraham. He said, I'll make you the father of many nations. Through faith, through what? Adopting, embracing. Because anybody that came under the covenant, we're going to do an addendum to this lesson now. But anybody that came under the covenant of Abraham, there was a token that they had to carry out to show that they was actually in agreements with their belief. If you believe in something, you're going to put your money where your mouth is. He said, and through faith he preached before the good news unto Abraham, saying, in these shall all nations be blessed. So that is the fulfillment of the prophecy. He said, I'm going to make you the father of many nations. To them that, he said, them that believe, them that which are of faith, of the corresponding action of Abraham, he says, you are what? Abraham's seed. I'm jumping the gun. Let me slow down a little bit. For they that which be of faith are blessed with faithful Abraham. So they which be of belief, like Abraham believed and had a corresponding action, are blessed with the faithful, the one who carried out, who did what the Father said do. He said, you which are of faith, with the corresponding action, are blessed with the Father of the corresponding action. For as many as are of the works of the law, he says, are under the curse of the law. For it is written, curse everyone that continueth not in all things which are written in the book of the law to do them. Now, we have another thought process here in this particular chapter. We have the law of sin and death. All right? Now, Shaul understands the difference. So, when we're reading his letters, if we don't know the first thing about the law, then we're gonna make the golden mistake that most people make when they read this, right? He said, for as many as are of the works of the law, the works of the law, are under the curse. For it is written, cursed is everyone that continueth not in all the things which are written in the book of the law, of the law to do them. Now, I don't have time, but I'll give you a reference, and we're going to do this in the addendum, right? In Deuteronomy 27, I'm not going to go there, but we're going to deal with that, all right? We need to understand, we talk about there was penalties, there was death sentence for those things that a person did not do, right? For example, I'll give you a real small example. An unruly child would have got, the penalty for an unruly child would have been death by stoning, right? So for as many as you are of the works of the law, right, are under the curse. So those who did not obey that component of the law, it'd be a whole lot of dead kids around here. You know, and so forth and so on. So I'm not going to deal with that. But quite naturally, yes, he said, if you are under the curse, for it is written, curses everyone that continueth not in all things written in his law. And the people shall say what? Amen. Right? We got to go to law to see what he's talking about, right? And it's hard for me not to jump over, but I'm trying to stay here in Galatians because I was asked to stay in Galatians, so I have to use my knowledge of the law to explain that to you, so you won't get this construed, you won't get this mixed up, and you thinking it's one thing when it's not. The curse was death. The penalty, the sentence of death for the deed, for certain deeds that was done. You died if you did a certain deed. It was in the law. That's why he said, everyone that continued not in all these things which are written in the book of the law to do them, you're cursed. Which meant what? Dead, right? Now, let's look at this word curse, right? Okay, 1944 in the Greek. Right? 1944 in the Greek. Alrighty. So we in Galatians chapter 3 verse 10. Right? 1944. Alrighty. We have to rightly divide this, and we have to break this down because so many people are confused and are lost when they read this. Now, it is the word epikataritas, which it says to execrable. All right, execrable. It says deserving to be cursed, execrable, very hateful, destable, abominable, and execrable wretch. Right? Now, that's from the Greek word for curse. Now, if we go back into the Tanakh, right, and we look at that word curse, right, I have to do this because, see, I'm a teacher. Let me just give you one reference. Deuteronomy 27:15 said, cursed be the man that maketh any graven or molten image, an abomination unto Yahshuwah, the work of his hands of craftsmen, and putteth it in the secret place. And all the people answered and said, Amen. So now, there goes that word in the Hebrew is the word arah, which means to be what? Because we got to understand, when we talk about curse, we're talking about different words. Okay, this one here, arah for curse. Okay, arah in the Hebrew, which means to execrate. Same word, right? Now, I have to do this, so please excuse me for doing this because I'll be accused of cherry picking, but I'm trying to point this out so we can see this. All right, so that word means to be hateful, detestable, abominable. Right? Let's go back to Galatians now so we understand that's what he's talking about. So he says that for as many as, verse 10, 3 of 10, as many as are not of the works of the law are under the curse. For it is written, curses everyone that continueth not in all the things which are written in the book of the law to do them. So how do we know it's a different, we're talking about a different law? Because this was a law that was specific, that said that this was what would happen to you if you did not do this law. The 27th chapter of Deuteronomy, we're going to go over in our addendum, we're going to show you what this is talking about. This is something totally different. Okay? Now, verse 11. But that no man is justified by the law in the sight of Elohim, it is evident, for the just shall live by faith. Interesting. I wonder where he got that from. Right? Okay. We know they came from the Tanakh in the book of Habakkuk. Right? 2 and 4 is the reference. But he says the just shall live by faith. So faith is not something new. But faith, the just shall live by faith, meaning that you shall live by your actions based on the instruction from your Creator. He says if you do this, you'll live. If you do this, you'll die. Faith says obey the instruction that you might do what? Live. That's what he says in Deuteronomy. Obey the instruction that you might do what? Have life. What the Messiah said? I come that you might do what? Have life. Have it more abundantly. You see. I come that you might have life more abundantly, right? All right, now, so he says, verse 12, and the law is not of faith, but the man that doeth them shall live in them. He just said what I just said. Isn't that what I just said? Now, the Messiah, he says it again, had redeemed us from the curse. What was the curse? Death. By the penalty of stoning. That's why we don't enforce the stoning laws, the death law. When a person breaks the law, we as the nation is not functioning. But if you break a law that is worthy of death in this society, you still get the death sentence, don't you? If you was charged on the charges of manslaughter and you was sentenced guilty, what would happen to you? You would get death by sentence. It's still being enforced, but not by the nation of Israel. And that's what this is talking about. The Messiah had redeemed us from the curse of the law of sin and death, being made a curse for us, for it is written. Now, where is that written at? Curse is everyone that hang on a tree. That's found in Deuteronomy 21:23. Okay? A man hung on a tree. There was a reason why a man was hung on a tree. We're not going to deal with that right now because I'm trying to stay with Galatians. Alright? But the man who hung on a tree was called a curse. Right? Now, he says the Messiah redeemed us from the curse so that we don't have to die. Right? Because the law is not being enforced by the nation. But, say but now, if you find yourself within the laws of the land where you live and you're convicted, you still get the death sentence, won't you? So that law is actually still still being carried out, not by the nation, but it's being carried out by the nations that we're under the government of. See how that works? He says the Messiah has redeemed us from the curse of the law of sin and death, the curse of sin and death, that the blessings of Abraham might come on the Gentiles through the Messiah, that we might receive the promise of the Spirit through faith. That we, meaning everybody, because through the Messiah, the blessings of Abraham had to come back on the natural seed, as well as those who would come, who was not of the natural seed, the wild olive. And after that happened, now both the natural seed had to be born in the thing, and the spiritual, those who will come after, who will become the fulfillment of the spiritual seed of Abraham, had to come under that through what? The Messiah. Verse 15. Brethren, I speak after the manner of men, though it be but a man's covenant. Yet if it be confirmed, no man disannul it, or add thereto. Now to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. He said not, and to seeds as of many, but as one, and as of thy seed, which is the Messiah. So that seed talking about is the Messiah. That's a whole other lesson, right? But let's let the scripture speak. Verse 17. And this I say, that the covenant that was confirmed before Elohim in the Messiah, the law which was 430 years after, cannot disannul. See that? That it should make the promise of none effect. What promise? The promise to Abraham. So the Messiah, being that seed, did not do what? Disannul the promise to Abraham of what? Abraham being the father of many nations. The Messiah coming, being that seed, to fulfill the promise to Abraham to do what? To make the other nations a part of the seed of Abraham, to fulfill the promise was given to Abraham that I'll make you the father of many nations. Ask me to say that again, I can't. I promise you I can't. All right, I don't even know what I just said, but okay, now let me get back. So where's that? Verse 18. For if the inheritance be of the law, it is no more of promise. But Elohim gave it to Abraham by promise. Shalom. That's what I just said, right? Wherefore then serveth the law. Wherefore then serveth the law. It was added because of transgression, till the seed should come to whom the promise was made. And it was ordained by the angels in the hand of the mediator. That's another lesson in itself. But the seed, let's read it again. It was added because of transgression, till the seed should come to whom the promise was made. Now, a mediator is not a mediator but one, but Elohim is one. Is the law then against the promises of Elohim? No, it's not. Elohim forbid. For if there had been a law given which could have given life, verily righteousness should be by the law, which is valid points we're saying. But the scripture hath concluded all under sin, which is true, that the promise by faith of the Messiah, right, might be given to them that do what? Believe. So we do what? The promise of the Messiah, that the righteousness, that the promise of faith of the Messiah, in other words, the promise of the obedience of the Messiah, humble himself unto death, he obeyed himself, might be given to them that do what? Believe in him, and believe that he is the one that came in the flesh to do what? To put you in the place of the first Adam, to where you have to make a decision to do what? Walk as he walked. You see how this is working? So you believe in him, you do what? Live like he lived. When you say you believe, you're going to mirror. You're going to be a reflection of the Messiah. You're going to walk as he walked. You're not going to make excuses to disobey the laws and commandments of the Most High because you say, oh, he did it for me, I don't have to do it. You're a hypocrite. Like Shimon Kefa was. All right, now. But before faith came, we were kept under the law, shut up unto the belief which should afterwards be revealed. Okay? The faith which is in the seed, when the faith, the belief in the seed, the Messiah, becomes a walking, living testimony in our lives, we now do what? The law was sent that until the belief or that seed or the walking word would come a reality in our lives. That's what that law was a reflection of, to show us the way of life. Whew. You can't get no clearer than that. Now, verse 24. Wherefore the law was our schoolmaster, to bring us unto the Messiah, that we might be justified by belief in him and our reflection of him in our lives. You see how it works now? So, belief in him and the reflection of him in our lives. But after that belief, the seed of who he is come, we are no longer under the schoolmaster, because you don't need nobody to teach you, because the new covenant says, he says, I will write my laws in their hearts, and they won't need nobody to teach them, because why? They will know me from the least to the greatest. It won't be no more need for no more congregations, no more need for no more Bible studies, no more need for nobody to have to listen to YouTube and all the other places. Because when we walk, when that which perfect has come, right? When the law, when faith, belief, the seed of the word, the life is prevalent in our lives, we won't need nobody to teach us. We'll be walking toward us. Just like he was, right? Or just like he is. For as many of you as have been baptized, now he's going, baptism is a work, right? For as many as you have been baptized into the Messiah, have put on the Messiah. You've been baptized. What is baptism symbol of? Death and resurrection. You died to your way. You died to your unrighteous ways. You died to your stiff-necked, disobedient ways, and you resurrected to the ways of life. He said, 28, there is neither Israelite, Yahudim, or Greek. There is neither bond nor free. There is neither male nor female, for you are all one in the Messiah. Right? Because why? He promised that he would make Abraham the father of many nations. And so when this comes, it doesn't matter who you are physically or gender-wise, because the promise wasn't to a male or female, but he said, I'll make you the father of many nations. And if you be the Messiah, then are you Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. So if you are in the Messiah, you're Abraham's seed by the spirit of what? Adoption. And then you are what? Heirs to the promise that he made to Abraham. And the heirs not talking about money. You can get the lesson we did on what the promise to Abraham was. Abraham was already rich and wealthy. That promise wasn't that he would have money. He already had money. All right. Chapter 4. Now I say that the heir, as long as he is a child, deferreth nothing from a servant, though he be the master of all. Okay, right? But is under tutors and governors until the time appointed of the Father. So, because you are of the faith of Abraham and you're Abraham's seed, he's telling you in this next verse, now, he said, you're a child. He said, even though you inherited all things, you're a master of all, but you're a child. He says, but now you're under the tutor and rulership until the time appointed of the Father. Which means that you're trained, because now that you're Abraham's seed, you have to be trained how to be that seed. You have to be trained how to appreciate your inheritance. You have to be trained. You have to come under the governors until the time appointed of the Father. You have to be trained the way of Israel. You have to be governed by the way of Israel. You have to learn the ways of the Father that he gave to Israel. Right? That's what he's talking about. Even so, when we were children, were in bondage under the elements of the world. Now, he's saying, you bound right now by the elements of the world. So you have to be trained and governed. He says, when we were children, we were in bondage under the elements of the world. But when the fullness of time was come, Elohim sent forth his son, made of a woman, under the law, to redeem them that were under the law, that we might receive the adoption of sons. Now, who is that talking about? Talking about Israel. To redeem them that were under the law. Because Israel fell a great fall. Okay? And so now, those who was given, who was called out, had to be redeemed first. So he said, to redeem them that were under the law, not to redeem them from the law. It's a big difference between the words, right? Play on words, right? To redeem them that were under the law, not to redeem them from the law. Different story. That we might receive the adoptions of sons. So now he's talking about the Galatians, so that you, Galatians, might become adopted sons. Israel had to be redeemed. Those who was given the laws and the covenants to carry it out had to be redeemed, and now there could be adoption. And because you are sons, Elohim have sent forth the Spirit of his Son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father. Why? Because you Galatians were not of the natural seed. Right? Wherefore thou art no more a servant, but a son. And if a son, then an heir of Elohim, through the Messiah. Right? Howbeit, then when you knew not Elohim, talking about you're not talking about Israel, you did service unto them which by nature are no deities or no gods, says King James. But now, after that you have known Elohim, the Most High, or rather are known of Elohim. Now he's saying you are known of him. How turn you again to the weak and beggarly elements, whereunto you desire again to be in bondage? Now, what's this talking about? This is not talking about Israel's protocols and laws. These Galatians didn't know nothing about Israel's feast days. Because when you read the verse before that, he says, verse 8, you did service unto them which by nature are no deities or no gods. So you was pagans. And he said, but now after you have known Elohim, or rather are known of Elohim, talking to the Galatians, how turn you again to the weak and beggarly elements? So they wasn't turning back to the ways of the covenant because they never had it. But they was turning back to the elements of what they did have, the practice of the pagan worship. All the paganism that they had, right? He says, you observe days and months and times and years. Okay? Now, once again, I reiterate. Galatians didn't know nothing about the feast days. He's not talking about the feast days. He's not talking about Passover and unleavened bread, Hakamatsu, Shabuah, Feast of Weeks, the Yom Teruah, Feast of Trumpets, Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement, Chag Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles. They didn't know about these feasts, so he wasn't talking about that. So he said, you observe days and months and times and years. Gentiles still do it today. Still observing days, times, and years. Every year we forced to celebrate all these days that the Gentiles serve, right? Nothing has changed. He said, I'm afraid of you, lest I have bestowed upon you labor in vain. Okay? So he's talking about them pagan days that y'all picked up. Brethren, I beseech you, be as I am, for I am as ye are. You have not injured me at all. You know how through the infirmity of the flesh I preached the good news unto you at my first. He gonna bargain with him now, right? At my temptation, which was in my flesh, you despised not, nor rejected, but received me as an angel of Elohim, even as the Messiah Yahshuwah. Where is then the blessedness? Where is the blessedness you spoke of? For I bear you record that if it had been possible, right, you would have plucked out your own eyes and have given them to me, right? Now, verse 16. We're in the 4th chapter, verse 16. He says, am I therefore become your enemy because I tell you the truth? Right? And that's what, most sides trying to get us away from all this pagan festivity and stuff like that. Somebody tell you that all Christmas is pagan and all of that, and New Year's and all Easter and all of that. Now, the brother's your enemy because he told you the truth, right? Verse 7, he said, they zealously affect you, but not well. Yeah, they would exclude you that you might affect them. But it is good to be zealous, affected, always in a good thing, and not only when I am present with you. My little children, he says, of whom I travail in birth. Again, until the Messiah be formed in you. I desire to be present with you now and to charge my voice, for I stand in doubt of you. Tell me, ye that desire to be under the law, do you not hear the law? In other words, do you not understand the law? They don't understand the law because these Galatians didn't know nothing about the law, right? For it is written that Abraham had 2 sons. Now he's shifting his thought again in the lesson. He goes from talking about them observing pagan festivity days that they already knew about, right? Now he's going on to say, for it is written, Abraham had 2 sons. One was bondman, one was by the bondmaid, the other was by the free woman. But he who was of the bondwoman was born after the flesh, but he of the free woman was by the promise. Which things are allegory? Okay, it's allegorical, brother. For these are the 2 covenants, the one from Mount Sinai, which engendereth to bondage, which is Hagar, right? For Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, an answer to Jerusalem, which is now, and is in bondage with her children. But Jerusalem, which is above, is free, which is the mother of us all. The true Israel, the true Jerusalem, right? For it is written, rejoice, thou barren that bearest not, break forth and cry, thou that travailest not, for the desolate have many more children than she which hath a husband. Now we, brethren, as Isaac was, are the children of promise. Okay? So, Isaac, he says, is a promised child, and we are like Isaac. But as then he that was born after the flesh persecuted him that was born after the spirit, even so it is now. Right? Okay? Now, nevertheless, what says the scripture? cast out the bondwoman and her son, for the son of the bondwoman shall not be heir with the son of the free woman. So then, brethren, we are not children of the bondwoman, but of the free. And that's true. Okay? Now, allegory. We understand that. The natural born physical seed, you have a lot of Israelites that's natural born. It's not going to make it in. Because why? They are not of the free woman. All Israel's not Israel. You got some Israelites don't want to embrace this thing. They want to stay out there in their paganism. You got some people who have adopted this religion and now they want to throw away obedience. You're going to be cut off too. Shaul says that in Romans. Chapter 5. He says, stand fast therefore in the liberty wherewith the Messiah hath made us free. Now, let me just say this here. This 5th chapter is where a lot of confusion is amongst those who call themselves Christians, right? All right, now, for the record, I'm not a Christian. I am a follower of the Messiah. Messiah was not called a Christian. He is the anointed. And I don't use the Greek term Christ because I'm not a Greek. I speak English, and the English equivalent to Mashiach is Messiah. So I use Messiah, okay, not Christ, okay? All right, now, let's go back. Chapter 5, verse 1. Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith the Messiah hath made us free, and be not entangled with the yoke of bondage. Okay, now, he says, stand in the liberty and be not entangled again. Notice he says, be not entangled again. We're talking to a people who know nothing, absolutely nothing about law. So to be entangled again, he can't be talking about the law of the Most High, because they can't be entangled again if they never were in the law. If they were of the seed that should come, then quite naturally, when you think about it, they didn't know nothing about the law, so they quite naturally can't be the people who knew the law. So he says, be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage. What bondage? Sin. Transgression of the law of the Most High. That's what he's talking about, right? Behold, I shall say unto you that if a man be circumcised, then the Messiah shall profit you nothing. Okay? Now, once again, he says some things that is confusing, and you gotta listen to what he's saying, right? All right? If you be circumcised, the Messiah shall profit you nothing. So I guess so. If he's talking about, let's think this thing through now, because there are those of us who are already circumcised. So I would venture to say he's not talking about physical circumcision at this point. I'll tell you why. Because if you were circumcised before you accepted the Messiah, how can you be uncircumcised? Think about it now. All right, let's continue to read. For I testify again to every man that is circumcised, that he is a debtor to do the whole law. That's not true. Because those who are circumcised that don't know nothing about the law is not a debtor to do the whole law, because they don't know the law. Just because you're circumcised, I mean, I came up in this United States of America. I was circumcised. I knew nothing about no law. I gotta be a debtor to the whole law. I know nothing about no law. So that's when you look at this and see what he's saying. Okay, Let's try to understand this confused chapter here, all right? Every man that is circumcised, that he is a debtor to the whole law. Is that true? Every man that's physically circumcised, is he a debtor to the whole law, even though he don't know it? I don't think so. So it must be something deeper. Let's continue. Verse 4. The Messiah is become of no effect unto you, whoever of you are justified by the law, you are fallen from grace. Okay, now. Let's think about this now. The law, we need to be clear, right? The law did not come to justify us. Okay? It was the schoolmaster, which we already went over. I don't want to reduplicate what we just said. It was to teach us till that faith or that belief has come. And when the belief is come, we don't need a teacher, because why? We're walking, living Torahs. Right? So, we're not justified. We're not teaching that you're justified by the law. But if you are of the Messiahs and are of the faith of the Messiah, you are going to have a corresponding action that reflects the grace that has been imparted, the divine influence upon your heart that reflects into the life. We're not saying you're going to be perfect and do everything right all the time, but we're saying your attitude towards righteousness is not going to be, I'm not worried about that. I'm saved by grace. That shows that you haven't had a spiritual rebirth, because when you can look and say, I don't have to do that, then you haven't been reborn. But when you are reborn, you're looking at striving to walk out your salvation with fear and trembling. All right? You're trying to walk in agreement to the covenant in its entirety and not in part. So therefore, when you come under the faith of the Messiah, you become a part of that seed of Abraham, and then you begin to try to pattern your way after the way of Abraham. You see how this is working now? So he says, verse 4, he said, the Messiah becomes no effect to you, whosoever you are justified by the law. You have fallen from grace. Absolutely. The law was not designed to justify us. It was designed to teach us the ways. Big difference, right? Verse 5. For we through the Spirit wait for the hope of righteousness by faith. Wait a minute, hold up. He says, for we through the Spirit wait for the hope of righteousness by faith. I thought we were already righteous. So if we're not saved by works through faith, if we're saved by grace alone and not by belief, not by corresponding action, then why are we waiting for a hope of righteousness if we're already righteous? For we through the Spirit wait for the hope of righteousness by faith. For in Yahshuwah the Messiah, neither circumcision avail anything, nor uncircumcision, but faith which worketh by love. Okay? Now, what is that saying? Obedience, let me reread that again. For in Yahshuwah the Messiah, neither circumcision availeth anything, nor uncircumcision, right? But belief which worketh by love. So in other words, It's a difference. When you believe, you will want to do all that you can do within the compliance of your covenant. That's the difference. What I do is not making me saved, but what I do is reflecting the salvation that's inside. It is reflecting the divine influence on my heart by reflecting it in my life. That's the difference. Right? That's what he's talking about. I don't believe he's saying you should not physically be circumcised. It's a play on words in a court of law. Right? If he said you don't have to, he says, for in the Messiah, if you're in the Messiah, circumcision availeth, or neither circumcision or uncircumcision. If you're in the Messiah and your heart is circumcised, that's what he's saying. See? The outward appearance is, once again, the reflection of the inside. If you are circumcised in the heart, you won't have a problem with circumcising the exterior. You won't have a problem with coming under compliance of whatever the Most High said to Abraham. Why? Because your heart has been circumcised. All right, where was I at now? You did run well. Who did hinder you that you should not obey the truth? Verse 7. Verse 8. This persuasion cometh not of him that calleth you. Verse 9. A little leaven, leaven the whole lump. I have confidence in you through the Messiah that you will be none otherwise minded, but he that troubleth you shall bear his judgment, whosoever he be. Right? And that's a fact. And I, brethren, if I yet preach circumcision, why do I yet suffer persecution? See that? Then is the offense of the cross ceased? So he said, and I, brother, if I yet preach circumcision, why do I yet suffer persecution? Now, what he's saying is, see, because Shaul, he's a lot smarter than we give him credit for, right? And I read this same chapter before, and I said, oh, Shaul was a hypocrite. But after reading it, now I understand what the brother was trying to say, right? He's saying you got people that's physically circumcised, but their heart's not circumcised, and they just hate and wanting to have him killed and all of that. He's saying, if I preach circumcision, why you persecute me? Why y'all trying to kill me? Why y'all trying to take me before the unjust to have me? Because he went through a lot, right? In the 16th chapter, Shaul was trying to make peace. In Acts 16, he went on ahead and he had somebody circumcised. He realized, you know what, brother, just to make peace, man, I'm going to go ahead and do it. You know, I don't want people to think that I'm not with the covenant, but, you know, but then he said all this here, it kind of left a lot of confusion. Prayerfully, we cleared a lot of it up, right? All right, now, verse 12, he said, I would they were even cut off which trouble you. For brethren, you have been called unto liberty. Only use not liberty for an occasion to the flesh, but by love serve one another. See that? Now he's bringing them back to what the Messiah says, talking about love. Hang the law on love, right? Because when you love the Most High, you're going to do the things that a lover does for their lover. When you love your neighbor, your brothers and sisters, your family, your cousins, whoever, you're going to do the things right by them that you would do to a person that loves you or that you love, right? All right, now 14. For all the laws fulfilled in one word, even this: thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. But if you bite, devour one another, take heed that you be not consumed one of another. This I say then, walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. So that's what he's saying. So he's saying This is the purpose of the law, is for you to walk in the Spirit. For the flesh lusteth against the Spirit. Right? The law was not given to you to be braggadocious, not keep all the law. It was given to you so that your heart could be circumcised, so that you could have the love of the Father flowing through you, that you can love those, your brothers and sisters and cousins, and those that are not in the covenant. You can love them right into the covenant. All right? For the flesh lusteth against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh, and these are contrary one to the other, so that you cannot do the thing which you would. But if you be led by the Spirit, you're not under the law. If you're led by the Spirit, if you're walking in the Spirit, quite naturally, you're not under the law, because you're walking in compliance with the law, with the Spirit of life. But if you be led by the Spirit, you're not under the law. Now the works of the flesh are manifested, which are these: adultery, verse 19, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, verse 21, envyings, murders, drunkenness, revelings, and such like, of the which I tell you before, as I have told you in the time past, that they which do, now he's talking about works, right? They which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of Elohim. So what did he do? He turned around and broke this law down and said, this is what the law is trying to communicate to the creation. They which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom. That's works, right? But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. And they that are the Messiahs have crucified the flesh. What? The works of the flesh. And he says, with the affections and the lust. If we live in the Spirit, he says, let us walk in the Spirit, and let us not be desirous of vainglory, provoking one another to walk in that way of love. Right? Now, chapter 6, last chapter, and I'm through with it. Right? All right. Brethren, if a man or woman be overtaken in a fault, ye which are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself, lest thou also shalt be tempted. So if you which are spiritual see a brother or sister that's falling short of obeying the Most High's law and the attributes of the law that goes along with it, he said, restore them in meekness and consider yourself. So we don't beat up against those who break the law, who break the Shabbat and keep the first day. We educate them, and we do what? We restore them with meekness, right? Bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of the Mashiach. Right? For if a man thinketh himself to be something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. Right? But let every man prove his own work, and when then shall he have rejoicing in himself alone, and not in another. For every man shall bear his own burden. Let him that is taught in the word communicate unto him that teacheth in all good things. Right? Who is the teacher? It ain't Kazak Yah. It's the Ruach Kadesh, the set apart spirit. Communicate to him, and let the Spirit speak to you, to your heart, about you doing right by the person that you're viewing. Because some of y'all, you don't feel a necessity to encourage a person with your substance. That's a whole nother lesson, right? Let me get back. Because somebody goes, oh, brother, you begging for money. Okay. Verse 7. Be not deceived. Elohim is not mocked. For whatsoever man soweth, that shall he also reap. Interesting, huh? Interesting that to follow what I just said, right? Verse 8. For he that soweth to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption, but he that soweth to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting. So if you live after the flesh, you're going to sow corruption. But if you live after the Spirit, you're going to reap what? Life everlasting. And let us not be weary in well-doing. For in due season we shall reap if we faint not. When is the reaping time coming? At the harvest. That's another lesson too, right? Verse 10. And we have therefore opportunity, let us do good unto all men, especially them that are of the household of faith. Ye see how large a letter I have written unto you with my own hand? He said, man, I wrote a big letter for y'all. 6 chapters worth, right? As many as desire to make a fair show in the flesh, they constrain you to be circumcised, only lest they should suffer persecution for the Messiah, the cross of the Messiah. Right? So now he goes back to that. Okay, now, I want to say something. There was a law in the Greco-Roman Empire against circumcision, and that was primarily the issue that the people had, because there was a law against it, and they would be killed if they was caught circumcising these children, right? These male children, right? That's another lesson. Just a little sidebar, right? Verse 13, for neither they themselves who are circumcised keep the law, but desire to have your circumcision, that they may glory in your flesh. See, he's saying, they glorying in the exterior, but not in the interior. They're really not keeping the law. They're keeping it as far as you can see, but they're not keeping it, right? Verse 14, for Elohim forbid that I should glory, save in the cross, or styros, or stake, of our Master Yahshuwah, the Messiah, by whom the world is impaled unto me, and I unto the world. Verse 15, for in the Messiah Yahshuwah, neither circumcision availeth anything, or uncircumcision, but a new creature. See? He says it again. Now, I don't think he's saying don't get your physical flesh circumcised. He's saying, what he is saying is that the circumcision doesn't mean nothing in the Messiah if your heart is not circumcised, right? Because the token of the covenant is circumcision, and you got to deal with that. But I don't think that's what he's dealing with. I think he's dealing with the spirit of the matter and not with the letter, right? Because I do believe Shaul, in defense of the brother, he can't speak for himself. I do believe that he did teach the people that was a part of the covenant, right? But because we see in the 16th chapter of Acts 16 that he actually did circumcise one person, and not only that, but he was circumcised himself. Okay, verse 17. From henceforth let no man trouble me, for I bear in my body the marks of the Master Yahshuwah. Brethren, the grace of our Master Yahshuwah the Messiah be with you, your spirit. Amen. So this concludes Galatians, the letter of Galatians, of Shaul, who calls Paul the Apostle, to the people of Galatia. I pray that you were blessed by what you heard, by you were edified, educated, enlightened, or just reminded in that in which you've heard. Until the next time, may the blessings of the Most High Yah be with you and your family. Shalom, shalom, shalom.